I've got to get out of full screen. There we go. All right, so welcome everyone. We're going to give us a couple minutes for our official time to have everyone come in. Awesome. Oregon, UK, a lot of UK, Columbia, British Columbia, Portland, Netherlands. I'm going to be going to Oregon this summer to ski in June at Mount Hood. Yeah, Sweden, Denver, Netherlands, New Brunswick, Austria. We just watched The Sound of Music last night with my daughter, who's 8, because she's learning more music and singing, and her teacher gave her that as homework. So we actually talked a lot about Austria, and we talked about what happened with Germany and Austria at the time of The Sound of Music. So a little history. Awesome. Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Southwest UK, Washington State, Durham, North Carolina, Israel, London, UK, Fredericton, New Brunswick. I'm so excited to see you guys. Sweden, Toronto. Brad and Pamela from Connecticut.
My friends, Brad and Pamela. It is so good to see their smiley, happy faces there. It's been so long.
Cool. Awesome. New Hampshire, Illinois, Bristol, UK. All right, you guys, keep it coming. We can start. It's our time. So I'm going to officially start. Do you want to record, Jean, or are you already?
I have hit record. We're rip roaring, ready to go.
Okay, awesome. So Dr. Kim Duramo, I think everyone in here knows who I am because we have invited my community to this webinar. And I know Gene over the past several years. He reached out to me many years back because he was doing some work with tapping, and we kind of collaborated on some things. And he's one of the coolest people I've met in tapping. I think that people use tapping in so many different ways, and it's kind of all around awesome. But when people are really conscious and in their heart, tapping can be such a fun, easy tool. For me, it's like, keep it simple, no nonsense, because when we get in the mind, it can get really convoluted. And now we're like trying to fix the problem, and it's not working, and what am I doing wrong? And it's like, oh, no. If you just play with this, it will do so much for you. So I always love sharing the Tapping Summit each year. It's kind of one of the highlights of my year. And I feel kind of just as excited about sharing this work because it's just another way to access your true power, and use tapping to do that. So Jean created the Tapping Q&A podcast. He's been doing this for, I don't know how many years now, but it's like an accessible way to understand tapping and use tapping. He's been coaching people for many, many years and has had really great success with this. So he's going to share his work and kind of the things he found to be universal when he interviewed a bunch of experts and looked at how are you using tapping? How are you finding this to be the most successful for, anything from stuff like what I'm doing, which is chronic pain, fatigue, chronic illness and disease, and you name it in the realm of health, but also others using it for personal success, relationships, money, business, blah, 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 fill in the blank. And he found that across the board, there were these universal things that everyone was kind of agreeing upon that they found to be most powerful. For those of you who don't know what EFT tapping is, emotional freedom technique is just a really basic way of giving new information to the nervous system. And I think of just kind of calming down the fight or flight overwhelm so we can tap our clarity, so we can tap our wisdom. And it's something I, as a doctor, have found to be one of the most powerful, simple, easy ways to do this. So I am really excited to bring Gene on to share his wisdom with you and share his work, and you can kind of take it from here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here with me. I was text messaging with my editor yesterday in London, and she just I love Dr. Kim so much. So big fan on this side as well. And so like you said, over the course of November and December, I did a bunch of interviews with some amazing transformational masters, you being one of them. And the really cool thing was, it was kind of when you're at a conference and a bunch of speakers speak back to back to back, and the fifth speaker gets a chance to reference the stuff that came earlier in the day. That is exactly what happened, except for the fact no one knew what anybody else was saying. And because these themes kept coming up over and over again, it's like, wow, like people who are using different modalities and working with different issues are coming to the same conclusions about transformation over and over again. That is something I thought that would be important for us to pay attention to. And so these are just 10 of those thoughts that came from those conversations as we were navigating with them. And as we do this, we're just gonna have a great little conversation about that and help you to engage with these so you can get more out of tapping in any transformational work that you do.
Yeah, and I'll invite everyone in the chat to share what you may be here for specifically. Like if you pick the one thing you would like insight or a shift around, what would that be? And we can kind of speak directly to those things. So thanks, Jean. You can.
Awesome. Great. So while those things are popping in, we'll just move on to the first one and we can start grabbing information out of that. So number one, not all transformation is equal, and that's okay. And I'm sure, Kim, you saw this a lot, particularly when you're doing emergency medicine. Like there's a huge difference between doing something that is triage and doing something that we're dealing with a root cause and we're trying to do transformation. And I think that when we're tapping, it's really, really important for us to recognize the thing that we're trying to transform at this particular moment. Like there's a huge difference in the type of transformation of me calming myself down in the middle of the afternoon when I'm being really super overwhelmed by something, and me working with a practitioner and dealing with some past trauma that is really, really deep. And I think it's really important for us to understand the scope of the work that we're doing at any given moment. Because if we try and go too quickly, too fast, it's going to be hard for us to have transformation. And at the exact same time, it's really easy for us to have skewed expectations. The really beautiful thing about the tapping world is this doesn't come up as much as it once did, but 15 years ago, there was all of this conversation about 1-minute miracles and 1-session miracles, and all of that stuff is truly possible. But I can remember working with a client one time. At the beginning of the session, she was only tapping with me to shut her husband up. Her husband, I'm like, go tap with Jean, go tap with Jean. She's like, okay, I'll do it. 15 minutes later, she was really disappointed that a lifelong trauma had not been cleared in a single round of tapping. Like that's how quickly her expectations changed as we were doing this. And I am open and clear that instantaneous transformation is something that is really, really possible. And at the exact same time, as we step in to do work and we're trying to create transformation, it's important that we have a sense of scope and what we're trying to do inside of that, and recognizing no 2 sessions of transformation of tapping are going to be exactly the same, because it's really important for us to recognize where we're trying to get in this moment. Am I trying to get through the evening and not eat a bunch of sweets that I don't want to eat? Or am I trying to clear something that's deep and as a root cause that I've been carrying around for a long time?
Well, and I think of with this, when I have shared my story in the past of healing a chronic autoimmune disease, and it was in days that those symptoms were completely gone, and people would have a really tough time with that because they think, well, how you had 10 days and this has been months for me. And the reality is, to be totally like even more explicit about it, it was actually instant. That when I would get that level of presence and resolution, the symptoms were immediately gone, but they came back. You know, it was like days of like, it would come back and I would do the integration again. It would come back. I would do the integration again. And it literally was over 10 days that I found it became fully integrated, and like the pain stopped coming back to, anyways, it was trying to get me into a new alignment. And I got that alignment, but geez, I don't even say that anymore. I not say, okay, within 10 days, because it sets up such an expectation that people, that's how it's supposed to go. And there's been other things in my life that took much, much longer. But if I've had the the patience to let it take as long as it takes, that's always what makes for like a better journey, and B, much faster resolution.
And I would be willing to bet over the course of those 10 days, as you were doing that work, is you started with symptoms and slowly kept creeping closer and closer and closer to root causes. And that's the reason why the integration came in. And sometimes we can be in such distress, even with a skilled practitioner, we can't see what a root cause is. Like we just have to downregulate and be okay in this moment before we can start having a more comprehensive conversation about what we're dealing with.
100%. Those 10 days happened after 2 years of working at it. 2 years of trying. And it was like, oh, root cause, like I got to the root, and then it was like within days. So it can take you years to get there.
Awesome. Yeah. So number 2, if you don't know what the issue is about, it is probably about fear. I'm a really, really big proponent on an emotional level that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. And oftentimes I think about when I am in a, like, dispositionally in a sense of poverty or a state of gratitude. When I'm in a state of poverty, I'm very closed off, clinging to the small things that I have. And that could be poverty of health. It could be poverty of relationships. It's not just financial poverty. And when I'm in a circumstance where everything is going great and there's abundance and I'm in gratitude, there is this big open sense. And that sense of poverty, that gripping to that thing, is I'm afraid I'm going to lose what I have. And so for me, whenever I'm doing transformational work, like I'm trying to take an action and I can't take that action, and I tune into my body and I feel the sensation in my body. Is it tightness in my chest? Is it butterflies in my stomach? Is it tightness across my solar plexus? I tune into that physical sensation and then I disassociate, because we are notoriously bad eyewitnesses to our own experience. And I ask the physical sensation, what are you afraid of? It's always the first question I ask if I do not have a clear entry point. And it could be, I'm going to try and I'm not going to heal. I'm going to try and everybody's going to notice. I'm going to try and I'm going to fail. And sometimes we'll even get contradictory messages. A couple of years ago, I was working with one of my clients and launching her podcast. And she said, what happens if no one listens? Pause. What happens if people listen? And so those two things were completely counter to each other. And she was able to live in fear of both of those because of the consequence that would come. If she did it and no one listened, it was a giant failure. If she did it and people listened, now she was going to get all of this sort of judgment. And so when in doubt, if I am dealing with something and I don't know an entry point, I feel it in my body and I just ask my body, what are you afraid of? And the second question is, what proof do you have that that is a possibility or a probability? And it is amazing the amount of stuff that kind of springs out, kind of like a jack in the box, when we look at something like that.
When someone just asked you, what if I'm so stressed out, I can't even think about tapping? And it's just such a great question, because what I do even before tapping, even if I ever do get to tapping, which I usually don't anymore because I'll just do the breathing and presencing, that's the most important thing, is like when I'm in a state, whatever I'm in, I just do the awareness exercise first. And okay, Kim, on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is whatever this is for you?
Yeah.
Or I'll do the opposite. How bad are you feeling? Like 10 is feeling good and 0 is the worst. How low are you right now? I'll be like, oh God, I'm a 2. And then I'll just take 3 breaths to acknowledge the 2, like how much this freaking sucks. And I'll just, okay, I'm ready to breathe in this too. And I'll welcome it in, and I'll just take like 3 or 5 breaths and acknowledge, wow, I'm really at a 2. Wow, this is wicked huge. This is really intense. This feels so overwhelming. This is really big. And just appreciate what's there and just take a few breaths. And I would say to that question, like, what if I'm too stressed to even think about tapping? Do that, because that's kind of your first step with tapping anyway, that you're like, tune in, practice awareness. Where am I on a scale of 1 to 10? How intense is this? Pain, fear, overwhelm, fill in the blank. And you just get a gauge of that. And if you just do that, that's enough. That's the most powerful part of the practice.
I love Milton Erickson's quote, all transformation starts by stating what is. And oftentimes when we're taught tapping, we're taught that you need to be as specific as possible. And people hear that like, well, I need to be specific. If I am so overwhelmed that I can't tap, I just tap on my collarbone and I just go, I can't tap. I can't tap. I can't tap. And then it's almost like mist in the backyard in the morning, that with each tap, it slowly starts melting away. And I can see a tree. And it's like, I am really angry. I'm really angry. I'm really angry because of this thing she said. And it's almost like with each successive tap. And so I just started the place of, I am so intense right now. I can't even tap. And I can remember when it took a while for my father to be engaged with tapping. It wasn't like his natural disposition. And so once he finally learned it, my mother called me a week later and she's like, you got to talk to your father. He's going to bruise himself. He's just like going at it so much because he's just so into it. But just recognizing that to start, like if you don't know where to start, just start. and it will just slowly reveal what those details are.
You know what I love about you? And I did this too, like when you interviewed me for the program you put together on this, like I was taking notes the whole time and had these great quotes that really did like an aha in my system. And I actually think you said that all transformation starts by stating what is. And the reason that is true is you have to start with what's true. What's
Yeah.
true is I feel like shit. What's true is I think I'll never get out of it. What's true is, and that's why people will say, why are you tapping on the negative? Aren't you affirming a negative? But you're actually just tapping on like the highest truth or the most prevalent truth that's coming in your system that you've been suppressing. That if you just acknowledge it, this is what feels true, it lets the energy move so powerfully. There were a lot of things I wrote down though in that session. And one of them, you said like, you'll tap on your to-do list. I never thought to do that. And I love doing that because any little glitches you don't see in your day, in your schedule, in your week, you're like neutralizing them. And then you do an awesome day.
And that comes from my disposition as a practicalist. Like, I'm not like looking for trauma for the sake of trauma. I am looking at the thing that is in the way in front of me right now. You know, it doesn't matter like what is going on in my lower back if there's a pebble in my shoe and it hurts every single time. Like the pebble is a much smaller thing, but it's the first thing I need to deal with before I can deal with the other thing.
Yes.
And so I'm like looking at what I want to be doing and what is getting in the way, and that then becomes the entry point as we kind of figure out how to navigate what we're doing as we step into that particular stuff.
Well said.
Awesome. Okay, number 3. At the core, we are herd animals. And I think that this is something that's really, really important, and it ties really closely to our sense of fear. 7,000 years ago, if we were pushed outside of the tribe, we died. We literally died. And I am not using the word literally in the millennial sense of literally. I'm actually using the dictionary definition of literally. We would literally die. And so there is a part of us that does not want to step outside of the norm because it's the old dumb joke. A bear shows up and 2 people are in front of the bear, and one of the guys starts putting on tennis shoes. And the other guy goes, "You're not going to outrun the bear." And he's like, "I don't have to. I just have to outrun you." And Brad Yates, our buddy Brad Yates, always says it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the scaredest. And 7,000 years ago, 2 of our ancestors were wandering across the Serengeti, and the one that noticed the danger faster got the head start, and that was the one that procreated, which was the one that procreated, which was the one that procreated. And so, like, the ability to recognize danger is our genetic heritage. And if we got pushed outside of the tribe, it was deadly. So now, when we're in a circumstance that I want to do something that goes against my community norms, my family norms, my religious norms, the stories that have been told inside of my house, we resist doing that because of this core nature that we are herd animals that want to stay inside of the herd. And so it becomes difficult for us to move forward because we take a step forward and a step back because there's a part of us inside of us going, no, 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 you might die. We can't have that happen.
So this has come up a lot in the community, this way of like living in fear as a way to survive. I got to hold on to fear. Fear is my protection. Fear is my gift. Fear is my savior. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize this until we did some tapping on fear. And someone actually said, the belief that came up, I have to have my fear or I'll die. I have to stay in fear or I'll die.
Yeah.
And I realized this is exactly where it comes. It's not true because our instincts can be there. You can be in awareness that you've got to outrun the bear and get to the next tree. And like, maybe it's 25 seconds and you're done. You can be in awareness that, hey, I'm not going to take that toxic thing because it's not going to be good for my body, but you don't actually have to be in fear to stay away from that thing. Right. And it isn't fear that saves you, it's awareness. And we really can let go of fear as a way of being. And that idea though, that I need this fear or I'll die, I was blown away at how, whoa, that really has been integrated in the collective.
Absolutely. And fear always wins. When I'm standing in the middle of the street and a car is barreling down on me, I don't think, ooh, 67 Mustangs. I love late 60s Mustangs. I think I must move so I don't die. So if there is a sense of fear that is inside of there, it's going to override everything else. And so it's important that we're getting to the root of it and we're letting it know, people might judge you if you do this and you're not actually going to die. Now, there are circumstances and there are places in the world where if you go against cultural norms, there are physical dangers for that particular thing. They're few and far between, but they do exist. But for most of us, going against cultural norms are not actually going to cost us our life in that particular way. And it's important that we're recognizing that as we're stepping into it.
Well, and it's important that you're stepping into your truth, even if it is a life threat. Like I was sharing in the beginning here that we watched The Sound of Music last night, and the one of the main characters in it is called by the Nazis who are coming into Austria, and they're like, hey, you've got to come into your position in the Nazi army or navy or whatever it was. And he didn't believe in any of this. He was against it, and he didn't know what he was going to do. And of course, they could have just killed him. And
Right.
you could tell that person was aligned in his wholeness and his fulfillment and his certainty. Like, I'm the boss of me, and I'm not going to let fear drive me to do this thing that I know is not right. And you have to sometimes look, and obviously it didn't cost him his life. He found a way through beyond it, because they escaped Austria, and they came to Switzerland and they were free. But the point is, you can't let that be the thing that dictates how you live your whole life, because then you're guaranteed to live a life in jail, which is what he would have done if he said, well, they're going to kill me, so I guess I have to go do this thing. He would have lived the rest of his life essentially in jail, which is where most people are functioning from right now, because fear has such a hold on them. If you leave your house, you're going to die. If you go do this, you're going to die. If you go outside the norms of what other people want and expect from you, you're going to die. We don't necessarily equate that, right? That it's what our system is feeling. Like, if I'm late for work, I might lose my job and then I'll die. So how do you want to live your life is kind of the more important thing to have as a guide here.
And the simple answer, someone asked the question, how do we tap for fear? Basically, what you do is you pretend you're giving a friend advice. The first thing you do is you tap and you say what you're afraid of. Then you imagine a friend just said that to you. What would you say to the friend? And for whatever reason, when we disassociate and we start giving advice to someone else, if I had a nickel for every single time one of my clients, because I have a lot of practitioners as clients, if I had a nickel for every single time one of my clients said, oh, I say that to my clients all the time, I would already be retired. We would not be having this conversation today, because we're so good at giving awesome advice and not implementing it, recognizing it for ourselves. And so if you're finding yourself in a place where you don't know what to say to yourself and you're in fear, say what is true, and then imagine a friend just told you that, what you say. And you're going to be amazed at the clarity you have at being able to come up with tapping phrases that's able to transform that fear. Awesome. Number 4, thoughts precedes emotions, emotions precede actions. Oftentimes, we don't recognize this is the case. Instead, what happens there is stimulus and then there is response. But the reality is, in every single moment, even if it's happening in a split second, we're making an evaluation. I am giving a presentation at work, coworker asks a question, I feel undermined. Well, there had to be a thought that existed between those two things, where it's like, they're asking a question. Why are they asking a question? They're trying to look good in front of the boss and they're trying to make me look bad. That's the reason why I have the emotional response. Yeah. And so for me, much of my work, when I'm doing work for myself, is trying to discover what are the thoughts that are coming before the emotion. And so the simple exercise that I do to get myself to figure this out is I just put A, B, C on a piece of paper. I think about something that happened in the past where I had a disproportionate emotional response. A is what happened. C is how I responded. And then I start asking myself the questions. Okay, what thought had to precede that emotional thought? What did I have to experience to think I was being attacked, or this is dangerous, or I'm going to undermine, or I'm going to fail? And then once we uncover that thought, now we get to interrogate whether or not that thought is true. Because if I feel like a coworker is undermining me by asking a question in front of the boss, that might not actually be the case. They might actually just trying to be helpful, trying to make the project go better. And it is possible they're trying to undermine me. Like both of those things are possible and they are true. But when we start to ask the questions about, this is the thought that I'm having, is it true? That becomes a really powerful thing for us to tap on. And the really cool thing of doing this process with the A, B, and C is you start to hear your thoughts in real time. It's not just after the fact that you're actually training yourself. This is the stimulus. This is the response. There's a thought in here. And as we become more present and we become more in the moment, the thought comes up and we get to evaluate whether or not the thought is true. Now, there are times in which a thought will come up and saying, my coworker's trying to undermine me. And I'll go, yeah, that's not really true. And I still get overwhelmed by it. And I still have the emotional response, even though intellectually I know the thought isn't true. But the more we hear the thoughts, the more likely we're to evaluate the thoughts, whether or not they are good and useful, and more than likely they're going to impact the way that we make emotional choices. So the cool thing about a little process like that is, one, I get to tap on the things that happened in the past, and two, I'm teaching myself to hear thoughts, so I'm less emotional in the moment as I am navigating the next moment and the next day and the next experience.
I always feel really good when I'm with you. I don't know what it is, but I know you're really in your heart, and I love what you're saying, but there's something that I just feel I'm remembering right now that every time I've met with you, I've felt really high and really light, and just I think what you're doing is amazing. And I know
Well,
what happens with this one, like then we try to like decipher, because when I'm in that space where I feel that density and I'm like in it, it's really hard to try to think that through and think about
yes.
what am I thinking? And so I'll just start with what you said, like, what if nothing about this is true? And it's okay. I feel exactly what I feel. And whatever's underneath this isn't even true. And I can let this go whenever I'm ready. And that will like unwind it to a degree that like I might feel the same density, but at least I'm okay that I feel it. And then this piece is really easy, that I'm like, oh my God, it's just because I'm thinking blah, blah, blah. And then you realize like, well, nothing's worth making myself feel like this. And
Yeah.
I'll let it go. Like it's an instant thing. So I really think this is a fun little, like, and you're saying training myself to hear the thoughts, because it doesn't happen the first time. Like you have to develop the ability to have that sensitivity and awareness.
Whenever I think of this, it's 22 years ago now, but I think of the first Matrix movie. And when the first Matrix movie came out, the big deal was the bullet time scene where the bullet was shot and Keanu Reeves slows the world down and he gets out of the way. But what that's a story about is him about seeing what things as they truly are. And as he sees them as they truly are, he can evaluate them. The bullet was still fired off, but he could see the reality that the bullet wasn't real. He was in a simulation and he could slow it down. When a thought comes up inside of my head that isn't true, but I'm hearing the thoughts, I'm like, oh, look at that old habit and thought I'm having. I now know it's not true. I'm just going to sidestep that and I'm not going to have the big emotional response inside of that particular thing.
And what happens at the end of the movie when, you know, because Neo said to Morpheus, are you saying I'm going to be able to dodge bullets? And
Yeah,
Morpheus said, I'm saying you won't have to. And then
right.
by the end of the movie, and this is what happens for me so many times, like he literally gets hit with the bullet and he's like, whoa, wait a
Yeah,
minute, what just happened there? And then he's like, okay. And then he's like, whoa, wait a minute. And then realizes I'm in a physical body. I just got hit with a bullet. And then boom, it's like a delay. And then he gets flung back on the wall like he did just get hit with a bullet and like, quote, dies. I'm not going to give a big spoiler for the rest of the movie, but he is able to move through that. That is exactly my experience so many times.
yeah,
Where somebody throws the bullet, like so, one time someone said something to me, and this was a person I was really, really close with. And she said, you're never going to be happy. You're always going to be miserable for the rest of your life. You'll never be happy. And when she said it to me, I was really in my heart. I knew she was hurting. I felt so much love for her,
yeah.
but I also was aware like, whoa, that's a pretty big bullet there. And I just stayed in the space of love. And it wasn't until like, not even right after I got off the phone, but like like days later and years and years and years that would echo in my head. And that's when I'd feel the bullet of feeling so devastated that she felt this way about me, or feeling so, it would ping me in these moments where I believed that about myself. And I'd have to keep doing that transmuting of like, it's okay that I feel this way. It's okay if this is true, and let it literally be okay that I got hit with that bullet, and not go into the devastation that it would, start to bring.
And I think one of the reasons why you and I are so often consistently in sync is because it's this idea of not transformation, but a little better and a little better. Like each moment, the goal is just a little better resourced, a little more present in the moment, less in fight, flight, freeze, or flop. And just consistently like creating this health and emotional resilience by consistently, slowly just keep taking steps up the ladder as we're doing this work. And so that the higher I'm up in my emotional and health ladder, when something happens, it impacts me less. And so it's not about, I'm just trying to clean up these past things, but we're like building the capacity to be more in the moment in a healthier way, so that when the new things come up, we hear them, we see them, we respond to them in different ways.
Yeah, 2% later.
Absolutely. Just a little bit all the time. Number 5, many of our issues were once useful survival tools. Oftentimes in Be Free, Set Fast, they use the phrase, the solution is now the problem. When I was 6 years old, and this is not my story, but a story I hear from clients, and I'm in the house with a bipolar alcoholic parent, I appease everyone all of the time because that's the only way I can navigate the day. And as a 6-year-old, to come up with that particular solution is brilliant. It is amazing. And now that I'm adult, and I'm trying to appease everyone around me, that is no longer a useful way for me to navigate the world. And so one of the things that becomes difficult for us to heal and transform are these things that were once solutions and are now tools that are no longer useful for us as we're trying to navigate this particular thing. Again, the old cliche, if the only tool that you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. If the only tool you have is to appease everyone, then you will just be a doormat in every single part of your life. And so it's important for us to recognize that as we're doing this transformation, I can validate and honor the choices and tools I used in the past and put them down because they're no longer useful for me. Because when I was 6, it might have been the only tool I had access to, because I didn't have agency. I didn't have a fully developed intellect. I was literally just trying to survive day to day. And I just found tactics that helped me to get through my day. Now, because I'm at a completely different place in my physical size, my agency, my intellect, my emotional stability, I have access to new tools, and I now need to let go of the old tools in order to step into new tools that allow me to navigate the day.
Yeah, instead of making them wrong, just
Right.
make a new choice.
The phrase that I'm consistently tapping on is I give myself permission to put down this tool because it's not useful for me today. And at some point in the future, if it's useful again, I'm allowed to pick it back up. Now, more than likely, these are tools that we're not going to pick up, but I like adding that little, I give myself the permission to pick it back up because I'm giving my subconscious mind an out. I'm saying, if you really do desperately want this again, we can go find it again. It's no big deal. We're not throwing it away. We're not destroying it. We're just putting it down because it's unuseful. And more than likely, what'll happen is we choose better, more useful tools, and the subconscious mind forgets the old tool and we don't pick it back up again. And sometimes we fall back into that habit, but it makes it easier to release it and let it go.
Yeah, I would agree with this. I see that probably 100% when I'm working with someone, that when we make ourselves wrong for it, it's just like compounding. But when we
Yes.
make ourselves right, like I'm so smart that I'm so angry because this one who's, 16 years old and is like pissed, all this bullshit around her, knows like, this is not my truth. And she's,
Yeah.
fighting against it. And I'm not going to swallow this. And okay, that was so smart that you knew, like, no effing way. I'm not doing it that way. And this rebellion, you can put it down now. Just like you're saying, is a really, it's key for like 20 different things I could name of like how we make ourselves wrong or how we get attached to that one who just is like, no, I have something to give you. Be angry. And she's right. And if you can let her be right, she doesn't have to keep trying to bust the door down. And she also doesn't have to keep holding it.
One of the things that I've been doing a lot recently, and this came up, I was working with a client who was really disappointed in the way her 13-year-old self responded to something because she's looking at it from adult eyes. And I said, no, 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 no. She was a hero. Look at all of the things that were going on around her, and by herself without adult supervision, she figured this out. And she said, no, she was a superhero. So one of the things that I have started doing when going back and working on these old tools is I have been giving the inner child talismans, tiaras, magic wands, superhero capes, and going to them and saying, oh my gosh, how amazing, strong, powerful, creative were you that you found a way out of a circumstance you never should have been in. And it does a couple of things. Is one, it empowers that younger part and helps it to let go of the trauma that it's carrying. But the other is it helps me as the adult to go, okay, my adult version would do that radically different, but holy cow, how much ingenuity did that my little 6-year-old self have to find that solution in a place he never should have been? And so just going and honoring it, it's been so much fun, especially when I let the inner child choose the thing, that it's so much fun watching my clients start to play and go, ooh, it's a red cape and a wizard's hat and a, just because they can't believe they get to create in that particular way. But it creates this amazing transformation for that part. So it's able to let go of the old tool and let the adult version take over and navigate the problem.
I'm like crying and laughing at the same time. I have a 3-year-old, and I can't believe how powerful and fun a tool that is, because that's his world. Like this morning, Mario let me sleep a little extra. So it was like 7 o'clock, and I'm like waking up, and I felt like I could lie here forever. And after like 15 more minutes, I was like, I can't get out of bed. I said, help, help, because they're in the other room. And he goes, I'm coming. And I can't get out of bed. And he goes, like he's busting up the bed, and he's got the gun, and he's got the I was like, you've saved me, you're my hero. And it helped me get out of bed and play with this part of you that wants to be the hero. That's what kids do, especially this kid. They want that job, and they want to be celebrated, and they want to like get it done.
The subconscious mind is a metaphor machine, and that is the place it loves to play. And if we change the metaphor, we change the system. And so I actually call it, when I'm doing that sort of parts work, I call it fairy tale physics. Like, what would happen if this was in a children's book? What would happen if this was in a comics book? How would we solve that particular problem? And it just gives us so much access to this genius that we get to play with, that then allows us to do transformation in such beautiful ways, because we're doing it through a metaphor. We're not doing it through a memory. We're doing it through a metaphor. We're not doing it through the trauma or the pain. And it allows for such a gentler healing when we do it that way.
You're so fun.
Awesome. Number 6, transformation is easiest when you encounter your issue with a sense of curiosity. I was in doing these interviews and having these conversations with all these people. I was shocked at the number of people who use the word curiosity. And it was so awesome, because what I mean by curiosity is, like, I made a bad choice in the past. Instead of going, oh, I made a bad choice, asking myself the question, why was that the best possible choice I could have made in that particular moment? What was I thinking at that particular point? And not a, what were you thinking? But like, let's try and reconstruct this thing and figure out what I was thinking. Because a sense of curiosity has gentleness and wonder to it. It doesn't have evaluation and scolding associated with it. Well, it does have evaluation because we're trying to evaluate what's going on. It doesn't have judgment. Like, there's a difference between me evaluating something and me judging something. When I evaluate it, I'm wondering, is this as useful, and how is it useful? When I'm judging it, I'm saying whether or not it's good or bad. And when I am able to step into my past experiences, my past choices, my past thoughts, even the thought I had 3 seconds ago, with a sense of curiosity, the first thing it does is it disassociates me just a little bit so I'm not caught inside of the emotion. The second thing it does is it takes that level of judgment away, and I can start asking questions. Why did I think that? Because then what it does is it's like, well, because you believe blah, 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 blah. Men in your family are never lucky in love. And now that I know why I was responding to that, I now have a thought that I get to investigate. Is that actually true? is that actually true for me? But it's a gentle way for us to sneak up on an issue where we're not rushing in and we're trying to fix the thing, but just going, what happened? I always think of Columbo. I don't know, you're probably not old enough to remember Columbo, but at the end of Columbo, he'd finish the interview, then he'd take 2 steps away and he'd come back and say, one more thing. Just he had this one little question gnawing at the back of his head, which was always the vital thing. But just having that sense of just showing up with a sense of curiosity makes it so much easier for us to find information.
Oh my God, it's 100% true. This is the thing, and I did a whole broadcast on this yesterday with really Tim Galloway's work that he's found with like thousands and thousands of elite athletes, and then like working with CEOs. Awareness is what actually created better performance. Like, where is my racket in space when I hit the ball? Is it in front of me? Is it in back of me? He didn't tell them, get your racket in front of you when you hit the ball, which is every tennis coach I've worked with does stuff like that. He tells you, be aware of where your racket is in space when you hit the ball. Be aware of where your weight is distributed over your legs, when the ball is coming to you. Be aware of blah, 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 blah. And so this lets you just have the awareness. And what I've already used in my practice forever is, what does it create? So people will say, oh, so I should do this instead of this. No. Be aware of what it creates when you do A. When you do hold this, anger, resentment, or perspective, or X, Y, and Z, because I guarantee you, like, when you play it out enough times and you see that it isn't creating loving relationships for you to hold this barrier of protection, you're going to make a new choice. Why? Yep. Because you already are whole and complete, and your system is functioning perfectly to show this to you, so you can choose, and everything's working perfectly to do that. So if all I'm doing is bringing you more awareness of what does it create, you're going to show up differently in the next 10 seconds, and your body's going to show up physiologically differently. And all the things people have shared here from, I feel shut down, I'm overwhelmed, I'm dealing with COVID, I'm dealing with neuropathic severe pain, or I can't sleep. All of it's the same thing. Your nervous system, immune system, and digestive system, all of your physiology shows up completely differently when you get into curiosity and begin to allow. Everything shifts when you do that one thing.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that, like, I'm a naturally curious person. Like, when I show up in a new town, like, I turn to my guide. What is the industry? How did the town get founded? How many people live here? Like, I'm just like constantly curious about everything, and did not realize until these conversations, when people started naming, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I do in the transformational work. And the important thing, like, one of the reasons why I think it's valuable for us to like pull out 10 truths about transformation like this is, when we take things that work that are implicit and we make them explicit, it's easier for us to repeat them and get better results with it. When I sit down to tap and go, okay, great. Like, I have a little tapping journal that I work with every single morning, and I have the word curious written across the top of the page, just going, okay, great. Remember, we're stepping into this with this disposition of curiosity. And I've written the word curious when I was in a well-resourced state, not when I was sitting down to tap, but it's the reminder that's saying, hey, you're going to get more out of this if we do this in the way that works, by naming it out loud and stepping into it, and not just like, tapping is awesome and tapping is great. And the more I'm repeating the things I know that work, the more likely I'm going to have relief faster. Number 7, to act in a new way requires us to see ourselves, the world, or both in a different way. It requires an identity change. I am sure with the chronic physical illness you deal with, the number of people who define themselves by their symptoms, define themselves by their circumstance, define themselves by what is going on. And if I define myself as something, it becomes radically different for me to do transformation. Like, I can work on the tail enders and I can work on the underlying thing, but if I continue to see myself in that particular way, then that's the way I'm going to keep consistently showing up in the world. And so it's not just about bringing stuff down, but recognizing, how do I need to see myself differently? My friend Pamela Bruner, who I coach alongside with a bunch of small business owners, talks about this huge transition that happens when you go from being a healer practitioner into thinking of yourself as a small business owner. Like that is an identity change in how you are showing up in the world. And oftentimes, if I only see myself as a practitioner, I can grow my business this big.
Mhm.
If I see myself as a small business owner, I see myself in a different way. But when we start to change identity,
Mhm.
change is scary. The stuff I know is better than the stuff I don't know. What if that is the wrong identity? I don't know how to live into that particular identity thing. But how important and vital it is for us when we're doing the transformational process. It's not just about the symptoms, it's not just about the root causes, but it's about the identity we give ourselves because of those symptoms and those root causes, because those become our habits and our lenses in which we see the world through all of the time, regardless of the transformation that happens interiorly.
Oh boy. This one is really moving. It's very true that almost all the people that I've worked with chronic illness, we become to some degree identified with the illness, the disease, the circumstances, or even roles we play. Like when I met my husband, my now husband, I never even thought of this before, but I had been divorced, and he said something like, "Well, you're a divorcee," and I was like, "I'm a what?" I didn't identify as like
Right.
a divorced woman. I didn't even think about it. I'm just like, I'm single, I'm doing my thing. And he had this whole thing of like what that meant. And I was like, what the hell is that? What?
Yeah.
And it's even that I have a lot of single women friends who are like divorced and their parents, and they live through this lens of, well, I'm a single mom, so blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And I couldn't believe the bullshit they would live out like with that identity and persona, and what it meant about their money and their access to money, what it meant about what kind of lifestyle they could live, what it meant about
Yeah.
the level of stress they needed to be under in every moment.
Yep.
So this is big, not only for the disease thing, which I think the conventional medical system does a great job of getting you to identify with a disease and like everything that
Mhm.
means, I have MS and therefore this is going to be my path, which obviously has been proven wrong. And the people
Right.
I've worked with have shown the opposite very, very well, but we can kind of buy into those roles. And then of course your physiology is going to play it out.
I do an unadvertised part of my practice is I do a lot of work with families that have kids who have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And I love that particular description. Diagnosed on a spectrum. It is not an identity piece. It's saying there is some symptoms and we're placing you someplace as an entry point, but it's not about who you are and how you are living. It's about what we understand at this particular moment that is something that we get to change and transform. And it becomes less of this thing that you are this thing, but instead, this is a place that I sit in the world based on what I understand right now. And that is something that will change over time.
Yeah. And I
Awesome.
got a different plug for my husband because he's done a lot of really positive things in this way too. He actually, along that practitioner line, he always told me, Kim, you're not a doctor, a practitioner, you're a global change agent, you're a world leader, you're creating a movement.
Yeah.
And it helped me really get, like, I already knew that since I was very young, but I wasn't really living that the way I could have been. And he was always the one who was like reminding me. And the things I do as like a global change agent are entirely different things than I would do if I thought I'm a practitioner. I don't do any of those things. And I
Yeah.
have to let go of those things in order to operate in a different way.
I was having I had a rough February and in March, and at the end of March I was having a conversation with one of my clients. She's like, hey, what's going on, how's this or that, because we're friends, and I'm like, this is what's going on, and she goes, I know why, and you need to figure it out. I'm like, no, you can just tell me. And she goes, okay, you're right, you've outgrown your clients, you are at a place where you're now thinking in a way that your last audience was not there. And it is the fourth time in my 12 years of practice where this has happened. But the instant she said that, I went, yes, you're absolutely right. And all of a sudden started approaching my work in just a subtly different way, not like a radically different way, but it's like, oh yeah, I have been speaking to people who've been listening to me in a long time in the same voice. And that is no longer the place that I am in the work that I'm doing. And all of a sudden just went, psh, liberate, go do that other thing. And it's not like I'm abandoning everybody and people will come along, but it was so liberating for me to go, oh yeah, you're right. Like I had not realized it, but I had habitually was showing up as the same practitioner I was 3 years ago. And my identity was changing and I needed to claim that as I stepped into that particular thing.
And now you're here. And I know that this community is very, very expansive minded and very receptive, and already been opening for most of their lives to higher wisdom. And it's really cool that you're here connecting with our community.
Awesome. Well, now a short word from our sponsor. So all of these conversations that we've been talking about in the rules, the lessons have been coming from, all live from this thing called the Tapping Success Academy. Over the course, like I said, of about 8 weeks, I interviewed 17 absolutely amazing transformational masters from all over the world, Kim being one of those. And the program is put together where there are 16 master classes with these 17 people. And it shows you how to use tapping to approach complicated issues, not just do stuff that helps you in the moment, like we talked about at the beginning, but really be able to unearth stuff and create some transformation. And it's particularly good at helping you to find root causes so that you're able to clear that particular stuff out, and how to start tapping for those things. You know, like we talked about earlier, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to step in and tap. The program is grouped in 4 areas. There's areas on health, on relationships, on money, and taking action. This is another one of these really amazing things. So I did 16 interviews, and I just talked to people on the thing that they were most excited about, the thing that they really wanted to share with the world. And 4 of them fell into each of these categories. Like the community just knew, without even knowing it, that we were just knitting together into this really beautiful place. There's over 20 hours of training. It's really pretty spectacular. So with each of the master classes, there is a full master class where I talk to an expert. Then there is a second audio where we do a director's commentary, and we break apart and we dissect and we talk about everything that happened in the interview. And the third part is there's a tap along experience for each one of the areas. So if you are not comfortable, if you're not confident, if you don't know where to start, you just hit play. And even though a lot of those tapping experiences happen in the context of the masterclass, we've pulled them out so that you can just go back and play the tapping parts anytime you want and have access to them. Step-by-step instructions on how to implement the amazing techniques that all the people teach. As you can see, if you have not been exposed to my work before, I'm a practicalist. I like systems, I like steps, I like things that are repeated. So you just have workbook that you can just go, oh, this is the process. I can follow these steps, I can tap, I can transform. And then I created a daily tapping journal.
Oh, that is awesome.
So the thing I hear most common from my clients is, oh, I forgot to do that thing. Back in September, I took a class. It was a 30-day class that had between 20 and 90 minutes of video training every single day. But at the end of the 30 days, you didn't have access to it again. So I had to do it in real time or I lost it. Like it was, you have access at the end of 30 days, you don't, and we're dueling this out one day at a time. So you just have to stay on track. And so I created a technique to make sure that I actually took advantage of all of those things. And so I've put that into the tapping journal. I'm sure you are like me, that you have a digital graveyard sitting on your computer of all of those really awesome programs that you've downloaded. And then the next time you see it is when you're putting another awesome program that you've downloaded next to the program that you didn't go through. The journal is built specifically so you actually take advantage of the program and learn from it in the way that makes the most sense for you. tappingsuccessacademy.com/dr-kim is where you'll get all of the information on the program. I will share that with you again later. And when we send out the recording, I'll send you a link to it. But tappingsuccessacademy.com/dr-kim for all of the amazing goodness in the program. I don't know if you all know Carol Look, one of the EFT masters. Yes. At the end of, Carol was the 5th interview I did. And at the end of the interview, I'm talking to Carol and I just start crying. And it's a little embarrassing to be crying in front of an EFT master, but she's a friend of mine. And she's like, what's going on? I'm like, these conversations are the best conversations I've had with all of you. Every single person who's in the program has been a guest on my podcast before, like Kim has. For whatever reason, everybody's on their game right now. Everybody's recognizing what is going on in the world. They're showing up in a way of like, we need to be lifting everybody up and doing really deep transformation. This is the coolest thing I've been a part of professionally as a resource in my life. I've spent over 500 hours on it. I know it will transform your life if you want to experience something like that. It's only $97. You can get it right there. And again, we'll come back to this when we are done.
Wow.
Number 8. We say we want to fulfill our desires, but what we really want is the outcome of those desires. Carol Look said this perfectly when we were talking about money. She said, people do not want money. People want the things that money gives them. They want security. They want experience. They want health. They want access. They want education. And money is that particular tool. And I think it's really important for us to recognize the difference between our desires and the payoffs of those desires. I can say, I want to have peace of mind. The thing I really want is when I'm caught in traffic in rush hour at the end of the day and I'm late getting home and my 5-year-old flips over his milkshake in the back seat and I don't lose my mind. That's the thing I actually want. Peace of mind is a consequence of that particular thing. And for me, when I'm thinking about transformation, I'm not thinking about, like, it is good for me to have these high-minded things like peace of mind, comfortable inside of my own skin, joy, abundance. I think it's more important that I can tell you what that might look like in my life. Because when I know tangibly what I am looking for, it's easier to take steps. And for me, whenever I'm writing a goal like that has a tangible outcome, I always add the phrase, this or something better. Because the pitfall that I have fallen into is I get really concrete goals and I get so fixated on them, I miss the other amazing things that are showing up in my life and in the universe. But by knowing the outcome of the transformation I want and how it impacts me in my life, and then tapping on this or something better, I am priming myself to have my eyes open to outcomes that are beyond what I even dreamed.
I love that. I'm like having this or something better right now, and it feels so expansive.
It is one of my favorite phrases in the world to tune into. And like, you know me, I'm a big dreamer. Like, I dream clearly, I see big picture well, and I am no longer surprised, but it's still unexpected when it shows up by the amazing amount of grace that there is in the universe. Like, miraculous things happen, and now to the point I'm like, well, of course the miraculous thing is happening. Why did I think so dumb that wasn't actually possible? But recognizing the fact that giving myself permission to be open to that, and you might say a phrase like this or something better. If you have a huge amount of resistance to that, then what that is telling you is more than likely there is some resistance and there is some fear of success. And that is, I think, the sneakiest of all resistances is the fear of success, because we're like, oh, I want all of these great things. You know, I was working with a client one time who had physical disability, and I said, what goes wrong if this gets better? And she goes, 2 things. One is the only reason anybody is in my life is I was attacked. And if I'm healed, they'll go away. And 2, my only income is the disability I'm receiving. And if I'm healed, I lose all of that money.
That's not uncommon at all.
You know, and so to be in a circumstance where there is, if you are afraid of the goal or something better, it's a great place for us to do investigation to figure out what that resistance is and what's hiding inside of that.
Will the general tapping program help with a specific illness?
Absolutely. So there are 4 things in the health section. And basically what it does is it gives you the tools to enter through your experience, the symptoms you are experiencing, and the emotional response that you are having to those things. Because for me, whenever I'm dealing with something, before I deal with an issue, I want to deal with the emotional response to that particular issue. I was working with a friend of mine who had twisted her ankle, and she was not healing very quickly. And we found out she was beating herself up for being so dumb for running on the grass, because she knew if she ran on the track, it was flat if she ran on the grass. And so there was this, I'm so dumb. The body was not allowing the healing to happen because it was the penalty for making the wrong choice. And so I always start with the emotion about it before the.
Sorry.
I was
going to say it's universal. Like, I've seen that with injuries that aren't healing. It's universal. There's some nugget in there where we haven't resolved so we can move forward and let that thing complete.
The question, is it good for seasoned tappers or beginners? The answer is yes. The reason why this is existing in this particular way in this conversation is because I learned so much through the conversation, but everything is done in simple, direct ways, which make it super, super easy for people to access that. Awesome. Number 9.
Just myself for a few minutes because I want to give this a little more time so we can finish. So people who are coming off will have this recorded, and you can visit this. We'll have the recording for you later.
Awesome. Great. Number 9, our first and primary work is loving ourselves more. And I know that this is something that you and I are super in sync with. Last year, 2020, I decided at the beginning of 2020, my primary and only work internally 2020 was being gentle with myself. And that was the framework all year. Whenever I sat down to do any sort of internal work, be it tapping, prayer, or anything else, the lens always was, how can I be gentler with myself? Because when I'm easy and gentle with myself, it is easier for me to honestly assess what is, which means that I can actually start the transformation. Because oftentimes when we're not being gentle with ourselves, we're preventing ourselves from seeing the truth of our circumstance. And if we don't see the truth of our circumstance, it is impossible for us to do transformation.
Well, and I know that Abraham consciousness with Esther Hicks would always say, the only thing to do, the only important thing is to feel better now. And I've used the same premise in my work, that if all you did was soften your shoulders and relax your body 2% more, you just gave yourself more love. You're just breathing 2% more better. You're giving yourself more love. And the only thing to do is feel better now, feel good now. And what will that take? Just a little shift. That's why, like, if you feel bad, but you accept how you feel, you just shifted 2%, because it's way harder to feel bad and be upset you feel bad or make yourself wrong than to feel exactly the same thing, but you're okay that you feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, the goal in every moment is just a little better. And if we're just consistently doing a little better, it's going to make, like, it's this rippling thing. And to what you were just saying, like, the only thing I can change is the now. And so, if as I'm worried about and navigating those things, that becomes something that's really super useful. And then number 10, when in doubt, tap without words. Gwyneth Moss just rocked my world, and she's an old friend of mine, but she was talking about the way she teaches tapping, and this has completely transformed the way I teach tapping. Oftentimes when we teach people to tap, we teach them to say a phrase and tap, say a phrase and tap, which is a really simple thing to do, except the fact you're asking someone to do 2 things. We know if we stimulate these tapping points, cortisol levels drop in the body. The body downregulates the emotion. Like, we can prove this sort of stimulation creates transformation inside of the body. And so when she's teaching people how to tap, she just teaches them without words, because that's something that they can repeat on their own. So now that is the way I start my day. I set my timer for 10 minutes on my watch, and I just start tapping. And I have my little tapping journal here in front of me. And if things come up, like on Tuesday, this shot of professional jealousy all of a sudden came rushing into my mind, awesome. That was the thing that presented itself to me in that particular moment. And I went after it till it went away. And then I just went back to tapping without words, but just created this process goal of, I'm going to do it for this many minutes, every single day for this many minutes. And oftentimes there is this thing that happens somewhere between minute 6 and minute 8, where it just becomes this yawn fest. As the body is down regulating, as we are returning to the parasympathetic nervous system, as we're navigating all of those things, to the point where it's just like, for 2 minutes, I'm just sitting here going, and this really gross way, I'm sure, is what it looks like, but it's exactly the thing I need to be doing. And so when in doubt, if you are in distress, Kim says, take 3 deep breaths. I say, just tap here on your collarbone. Like, just take a deep breath, do the exact same thing, and just go here. Don't think about the points. Don't think about the order. If you're old enough like me, you remember the old Yellow Pages commercial, just let your fingers do the walking, and just like not even think about it, and just be present and just let them go. And it is amazing the clarity that is going to come with that, if you improve your resource state by 2%, you're going to make a better choice. If you improve your resource state by 2%, you're less likely to overreact. If you improve your resource state by 2%, you're going to see things more authentically and truly, which makes it easier for you to take new actions.
Wow. Thank you. That was incredible.
Awesome. So those are the 10 lessons. You know, you're certainly more than welcome to come along and join us over here at Tapping Success Academy. It's just sitting there waiting for you. There's lots of really, 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 really great stuff. And you can do it in the order that makes the most sense for you.
Let's review the points, because there are some people, and I'm sure if we share this recording, that won't know the points. And I think that might be useful, especially for that number 10, because that's a great little one takeaway.
Yep. Tapping points. The tapping points that I use, I wrote a book that didn't happen, which is a longer story, but I looked at the history of all of the tapping points as the numbers have gone up and gone down. Most people use what we would call the shortcut basic method. You start on the side of your hand here. And then the points I use, tippy top of the head. Some people like avoiding the tippy top of the head because you're pounding on your brain. I'm okay with that, but some people are less keen on that. Eyebrow, which is right on the edge of the eyebrow. Side of the eye is as far forward as you can get without going into your eye socket. If your vision is blurring, you're tapping in the wrong spot. Under the eye is directly below your eye here on the cheek. For people like me who have seasonal allergies, this can be a little tender because you have a sinus cavity under there. If it hurts, don't do it. Take responsibility for your body. If it's too painful to tap there, just rub in little circles. Under the nose is between the lip and the nose. Chin, even though we call it the chin, is actually the little divot in between. The collarbone point, the easiest way to do it is make a flat hand, make an L with your index finger and your thumb. And if you lay your index finger on one collarbone and your thumb on the other collarbone, and you just tap with your whole hand, you're going to get the spot. There's a little spot in there, but there's no consequence in tapping on the wrong spot. And then under the arm is right on your side, bra strap height. Poke around in there until you find a little tender spot. And those are spots I use. Again, when I'm tapping without words, it's just 6 or 7 taps on each point. And again, just at a certain point, once your fingers get used to the rhythm, you stop thinking about what your hand is doing. And I'm just paying attention to what's coming up and watching it go away, and paying attention to what's coming up and watching it go away.
This was awesome. I love you. You're so lovable. You're so lovable. When you said the thing about when you were noticing, like, whatever, this jealousy thing that came up, I could really see how, like, you're in the space of, and I think of this a lot, like, we're here to be stewards of this physical body that may be carrying a lot of density, maybe plugged into a lot of programs, maybe learned a lot of old belief systems. And like, we're here to be the one to like help it dump the stuff and nurture the body through that ascension and that transmutation, not to be perfect already or to have a body that already has the, the consciousness that we are, because we all are pure consciousness. We come into this body that isn't carrying that. And then we're here to like nurture the body through that upgrade process. And I think you're just a great example of what that looks like, because it's authentic and you're super like enthusiastic and you can tell like how much you're in love. That's why you do the work you do. I know you used to do something else, and now you just like left that whole thing and you're doing this work, and that's, because there's love. Yeah.
Awesome.
How awesome you guys are. Thank you so much, Jean. So
you bet.
Jean's at Tapping Success Academy. I'm going to share this video so people can just find your general work as well and plug into what you're doing.
And if you go to tappingpodcast.com, there's 2 really great conversations Kim and I have about all sorts of fun tapping stuff, where it's the other way around, where I'm peppering her with questions and pulling wisdom out of her.
Thanks for being here, you guys. I'm so glad.
Have a wonderful day. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Awesome. I love you guys. Bye. So